Hello and welcome back to Curless Mania, where we talk all things rock, pop, and prog. Appreciate you coming back. Today we are talking about Mummer by XTC, released on August 30th, 1983. This is, in my opinion, quite the overlooked record in XTC's catalog. I think there are some people that do love it. There's definitely a section of their fan base that's really into this record, but generally it doesn't get talked about that much. And this video was inspired because I listened to it the other day and I was really impressed by it. I forgot how good it was, to be honest. So I figured it would be a great time to talk about this. Originally I was going to talk about Skylarking, but that video became too long. I actually tried a video of that and it became way too long. So I'm going to shorten the story and I'm going to start with this record because it's definitely worthy. So I can't talk about this record without getting into some history, and I have to talk about this record, English Settlement, which I can't believe I don't have on vinyl. That will be rectified very soon. Actually, though, this CD does sound good. There's nothing wrong with this CD. This is one of the original pressings, I think, from Geffen. So English Settlement, released February 12th, 1982. It's a double album filled with diverse songs and arrangements, acoustic guitars, Rickenbackers, keyboards, synths, you name it. This was really the kid in the candy store record for Andy, Colin, and Dave, where they really went in, and Terry, and they really went in and just went to town, and they didn't really worry about how it was going to sound live. I think their previous records, they were worried about how it was going to sound. They had to make sure they would replicate it live. Black Sea, for example, is a very live record. And really all of their albums had been up to that point very stripped down to make sure that they could replicate it live. This one, they didn't care. They said, you know what? We don't care anymore. We're just going to go in and do what the song needs. Doesn't matter whether we can replicate it live or not. Which becomes an issue very shortly. So I have 12-string guitars and fretless bass that Colin had bought, which gives it that slippery sound. Recorded flawlessly by Hugh Padgham. Hugh was really on the rise at this point in the early 80s. He was going to become Phil Collins' producer. He was going to produce Genesis. He was Peter Gabriel. He was going to be all over the place in very short time if he wasn't already at this point. I think actually at this point he was already. Again, it sounds fantastic. He's a great producer, and I would love to work with him someday. I'm a musician. I would love to have Hugh Padgham record my record. That would be like my dream come true. There were 3 singles released from this record. Senses Working Overtime made it to number 10. Ball and Chain made it to 58. And No Thugs in Our House. All great songs. All great singles. And they all did well. I mean, fairly well. And upon release, I have here, it gets glowing reviews from the UK and the US press. Both across the pond. US people are writing this album up like it's an amazing record. And it is. They have a hit single. They got a critically lauded double record, and they are on the rise. So this album was like a big deal for them. They were really hitting it hard. They had been on an upward trajectory since White Music, and this was becoming the pinnacle of wow. XTC is really now a band to be reckoned with. They're going to become big. They had toured with the Police. The previous tour, the Black Sea tour, and that had gone very, very well. And the Police were the biggest band on the planet at that point. So that tour really helped their visibility, and this was sort of the payoff. And I'm saying on my notes here, I said the 1982 tour for this record would put them over the top. It should put them over the top. This was going to be the tour that was really going to push them and push this record to the top. The tour is anticipated by fans. It is booked. US and UK dates are booked. Everyone is amped up. The record label, the manager, everyone's ready to do this tour except for Andy Partridge, who is not ready to tour for this record. And he's actually really worried about it. By the 1980s, Andy was tired of touring. He felt that they were overworked and underpaid, essentially. And they had been touring relentlessly since they started. They had not stopped. It was a got to drink my coffee 1 second. It's good. They were on a touring treadmill that had not stopped, and they really had been worked like dogs for a while. And I think Andy was really seriously fed up with this. And also, they were working their butts off and not seeing any money from it. So he's like, well, where's all the money? What's going on? I'm touring, so we're going crazy. We're selling records, we're touring, and I'm still not seeing any money. So what's going on? Somebody's stealing my money, essentially. He was also worried about, as I talked about, the new complex arrangements and that they weren't going to, these songs were not going to translate live. These new songs were not going to do well live because they only have 4 people. And they had overdubbed like crazy on this album. And they were really worried about the songs going over. Andy was very worried about the songs not sounding good live. So he had shown issues of starting to tire of touring in 1980 with the Police tour, as I had mentioned earlier. When they hit upstate New York on this tour, they stopped the van because he had to use the facilities. And I guess he looked around. This is during the 1980 tour. He looked around and had almost like an out-of-body experience where he was like, what am I doing here? What are we doing? Why am I here? Who am I? What's going on? And he started to get a little dizzy and sort of had like almost like a little panic attack. So this is the previous tour. So he was starting to show signs of, there's something might be going wrong. He got back in the van and they continued the tour, but apparently he was in fetal position and crying and just, it wasn't good. Like, something's going on with Andy. What's the matter? But they did finish that tour. But again, warning signs. So then in April of 81, his wife, Marianne, apparently flushed his Valium tablets down the toilet, thinking that this was good for him. And he had been taking Valium since he was a teen. So he was really addicted to Valium at this point in his life. And for her to just completely force him to go cold turkey didn't help. I think he called it, his mind was melting because he couldn't deal with that. So I believe this was, again, right before the tour started. So on June 2nd, 1982, they played their last gig in Britain. So essentially Andy called it quits. He said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, guys. I can't do this tour anymore. I'm falling apart. He kept trying to play shows and he said he would have panic attacks on stage and he would freeze and he'd forget the words and he'd start shaking and getting chills. And he just said his body was rejecting. He was trying to do it, but his body kept telling him, no, you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be here. So he essentially quit the tour about halfway through, and to the aggravation and confusion of his bandmates. So this was supposed to be the big tour, and Andy quits about, I don't know how many dates in, but he quit. I mean, I wasn't that far. I think he'd done I don't know how many dates they had done, but he quit basically. I think it wasn't even halfway through yet, and he had already quit. So the band was extremely upset, especially Terry, by all accounts. Virgin was upset, the management was upset and angry. Everyone was disappointed and angry about this decision because it just felt like he was just deciding to stop. It didn't seem like he was really in that much of, there was really that much of a problem. It seemed more like Andy was just deciding to stop. So this was the atmosphere. Put all that together, and this is the atmosphere going into making this album. By the way, this is a side note. If you're an XTC fan, you definitely have to pick up this book. It's called Songs and Stories, or Song Stories, XTC, and it's XTC and Neville Farmer, and it's excellent. I mean, if you're a fan, there's so much information in this book. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I think I've read it like 3 times because it's just so, if you're a big fan of XTC like I am, it's just very enlightening. So anyway, back to Mummer. So the tour is canceled. It's over. Everyone shuts it. The whole machinery shuts down. Andy had recently, and Marianne had recently bought a new home. So he goes back to his new home to rest and recover, essentially. And he just said, in all the interviews around that, or after that time, he said something like he just didn't want to be seen. He didn't want to leave the house. He just became this, I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to do anything. I just want to chill at home and do nothing. I don't want anyone to see me. So he was really in that mode. So he would play, acoustic guitar, just strum acoustic guitar in the back garden. And he would come up with these, kind of acoustic-y pastoral songs like Love on a Farm Boy's Wages and Lady Bird, things like that. So he's writing new songs. He said all these songs did pop out pretty quickly, like all of these songs just kind of rolled out. And so it wasn't really a problem of him having any writer's block. He was actually writing even more than usual. So Terry moves back from Australia with his girlfriend, Donna. He essentially he was the most unhappy about them quitting touring, and he kind of felt like the band was falling apart at this point. Like, if we're not going to tour, then what are we, we're just going to make albums, that's it. Like, he loved touring, so he wasn't psyched about this decision at all. So he came back, but he wasn't happy about it. And essentially he quits after recording 2 songs. They recorded maybe 2.5 songs or something, and he quits. I guess in the middle of Love on a Farm Boy's Wages, he just said, that's it, stood up and said, you know what? I'm not enjoying this. I don't like these new songs. I'm going to move back to Australia. I'm out of here. And he just got up and left. And so they're going, okay, another problem, just another disaster. So long story short is what are we going to do now? So Dave Gregory finds another drummer, Pete Phipps, which is from a band that they had toured with earlier. And he came in for the rest of the album, and he actually did a very good job. They also changed producers at this time. So they'd been using Hugh Padgham, who did a great job on Anglo Settlement. And they brought in Steve Nye, who had done an album called Tin Drum with a band called Japan. And Andy really liked the sound of that album, so he said, who produced that? Oh, it was Steve Nye. Okay, let's bring him in. So Steve Nye comes in to produce the record. And it's interesting. I did listen to Tin Drum not too long ago just to check it out and see what it was like. And I did hear a lot of the production. You can hear a lot of the sounds on that record as well. You can tell it's the same producer. Let's put it that way. But one thing Dave Gregory pointed out was that Japan was a keyboard-based band, not a guitar-based band. So he was a little worried about the way this was going to sound with a guy who had been, Japan was a keyboard band. We are not a keyboard band. So anyway, I'm making this really long story. So Virgin, they hand in the record, and Virgin says, no thanks. We need more songs. I don't hear a single. And you have to remember, I'm sure Virgin at this point had kind of a bad attitude toward XTC because they were mad at them. So they were kind of making their lives a little difficult. So, okay, you're not going to tour? All right, fine. Then you better make an amazing record, if you're not going to tour to promote it. So I'm sure that was kind of feeding some of their reactions. But they basically came back and said no, and they rejected it twice, actually. So Andy went back and wrote Great Fire, which became the single. They apparently listened to that song and said, okay, this could be a hit. So, okay, we'll go ahead with the record. So Virgin finally releases the album in August of 1983. And onto the record, onto the tracks. There's a couple of really interesting tracks on this album where they really are experimenting again, kind of taking the English settlement idea and taking it even further. Things like Human Alchemy, which I used to really kind of skip. I used to not like that song very much, but as I've gotten older, I do really enjoy it. It's so unique. It's like only XTC would do a track like this, where it's, you know, it's got that you know, that whole like, and it actually kind of does sound. It's a song about slavery, and it kind of does sound like people walk, like a chain gang walking, like and it's just, at first you're like, what is this song? But it kind of grows on you a little bit. Deliver Us from the Elements is another one that sticks out. Like, that's a very psychedelic song, and honestly, it might be the first time where the Dukes showed their faces, right? It kind of sounds like a Dukes track. It's very psychedelic by the end, especially. It kind of has that whole like, wow, this is really cool. And then, you know, obviously, Great Fire is a very good single. Although I think the verses are a little eclectic. The chorus is obviously great, and very hooky. But I always say the verses are a little it's like very machinery like. And then Beating of Hearts is a great opener. I love Beating of Hearts. And Wonderland is another great mellow song. Very, very, you know, again, very pastoral, very sort of jazzy a little bit. As well as Lady Bird is another one that's very kind of jazzy. So they kind of touch jazz a little bit on this record as well. The only song that I think is really very old school XTC is the last song, Funk Papa Roll, which really comes out swinging. But ultimately, you know, this record is excellent. It's very good. And if you're an XTC fan, you're going to love it. And it's interesting that they didn't show their faces on the cover either. That's the whole idea of Mummer, is that I guess there were like entertainment troops on the streets of England and Old England where they would call themselves mummers, and they would wear masks and you didn't know their identity. So it's kind of an idea. It's an idea of that Andy was sort of in hiding, you know, and they didn't want to show their faces on the cover. So I'm sure Virgin loved that idea too, right? They're like, great. But it's a cool cover. I like it. And anyway, XTC Mummer. If you don't know this record, definitely check it out. It's worth finding, and you might be pleasantly surprised at how much you like this album. So that's really it. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background on it and just go over the tracks just kind of quickly. Didn't delve that far into the tracks, but go check it out yourself and listen. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't want to keep it too long. Trying to keep it a little shorter than usual. And I'll be doing more XTC, so this is just the beginning. I love this band too much. There's going to be another video of XTC for sure. So anyway, that's it. I hope you guys have a great morning, night, afternoon, wherever you're watching. Please remember to like and subscribe on the channel. It really helps. Appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video.